Why, hello, history fans, and welcome to Fallen Timbers Battlefield. As you can see, this terrain looks like a tornado swept through it, which is actually why it was picked and how it got its name. So, the Northwest Indian Confederacy, which eventually became Tecumseh's Confederacy, and Matt Anthony Wayne said it looked like a tornado had swept through and that it would be perfect for an ambush. So, what helped set this battle up was after the Americans defeated the British in the American Revolution, at the Treaty of Ghent, all of the British territory in North America minus Canada, which included the present-day states of Indiana, Ohio, Michigan, which was the Northwest Territory, was ceded to the U.S. became U.S. territory. But obviously there were still people that lived here, which was the Northwest Confederacy. And so they were going through various treaties and things like that, and due to their living styles, eventually a battle was likely. And actually there had been two already. Washington had sent troops around under General St. Harmer to attack Keekanagia, which is present-day Fort Wayne, Indiana. And they got just annihilated as they were destroying the Indian villages. And as you can see, this whole terrain looks like it'd still be perfect for an ambush. Think if you were trying to fight like Mel Gibson and the Patriot, this would be ideal for that. There may not have been the exact same underbrush around here, like all these little trees and things like that, due to animals and things like that taking care of them, but you can still see it'd be perfect for that. So, after General Harmer was defeated there and sent crawling back to Fort Washington, which is present-day Cincinnati, Washington ended up sending another force under General Arthur St. Clair. And they started to go up, and they ended up getting attacked at Battle of Wabash, which is present-day Fort Recovery, Ohio. And they ended up losing, I've heard anywhere between 85 to 97%. And killed, wounded, captured. Then they go back, and Washington realizes he needs a new general. So he ends up deciding on General Mad Anthony Wayne, who was a big disciplinarian, which is why a lot of people called him Mad. But he was also just slightly a little crazy and aggressive. At one point during the American Revolution, he actually got hit in the head by a musket ball and kept going. I don't know about you, but that's a little nuts. And on top of that, you had, when Mad Anthony was picked, his second in command was a guy by the name of James Wilkinson, General James Wilkinson. Congress decided to try to keep him happy by giving him the rank of brigadier general. Well, that didn't quite satisfy him, and part of what they didn't quite know is at the same time that was all going on, James Wilkinson was trying to get Kentucky to become its own kind of independent territory and free from Virginia, but also free from the U.S., and he actually wanted to try to get it to go down to Spain. And he was Agent 13. And so that was going on as well. But what also was going on is the French were at war with the British, and the British were trying to set up a Indian buffer state, in a way, in the Northwest Territory, with them in charge of the forts at the Indians' request. Okay, so as you can see, we skipped ahead a little bit. There was a video without me talking, but I was concerned you wouldn't be able to hear me speak. But as you can tell from that terrain, it would be ideal for a whole person to hide in that. Now, some of that might have adjusted a little bit in the time, but not all of it would. But this would also probably be what sections of the battlefield looked like. It wasn't all of that. Because Wayne's battle line extended for a couple miles and extended to the river. So, in addition to the British trying to set up an Indian buffer state, they were convinced that there would be war with the U.S. within the year. And so, at least the British governors in Canada, Guy Carleton General John Simcoe of Turn fame, and I forget who his boss was, but they were convinced that battle with the U.S., war with the U.S. would be within a year. So Simcoe's boss had him set up a fort near here called Fort Miamis, and to help support the Native Americans in their fight against the U.S. Now, Chief Little Turtle, who helped lead the defeat of the U.S. forces along with Blue Jacket, the Battle of Wabash, wanted the British to, since they were so gung-ho on helping the Native Americans, he asked them for a cannon, but they wouldn't give it. Now, Blue Jacket, on Matt Anthony Wayne's march up here, wanted to attack them near the battle where the Battle of Wabash occurred, which is, like I said, Fort Recovery. Wayne had built a fort there on his way up, and actually had to move the bones of the fallen comrades from like nearly 2 years earlier to build his fort and to camp on it. Now, Blue Jacket, during that battle, it was the only successful time that Wayne's army had been surprised. And Blue Jacket and his forces had actually captured some of Wayne's supplies and things like that, because it's the only time that Wayne's supply convoys and stuff didn't actually listen to them, didn't actually do what Wayne had set up for them to do, and they were caught off guard. Wayne had designed his march to where he would never be caught off guard, where there's always riflemen out front to secure the area, and then they'd build up a stockade or a defensive perimeter every night when they camped. And then the convoys were supposed to always be guarded. Well, the convoys decided to leave that day and head out. And then, before their guard was there, they were still eating breakfast in the fort. And they ended up getting surprised. So, what happened here is you had the Potawatomi, the Wyandot, the Mingo, the Mohawk, the Miami, the Delaware, the Shawnee, the Ottawa, the Ojibwa, some Canadians, and some British regulars who were those last two, they disguised themselves as Native Americans. And then you had the Americans, which were led by Matt Anthony Wayne, and he had his force designed where it was like a Roman legion, where he had all the branches of the army within each little 4 legions. So you had the dragoons, he had riflemen, he had his infantry, and then he had his artillery. So as Wayne advanced and had his stuff set up, he had it trained to where they weren't going to fight in European-style lines of warfare. He had them trained to where they would fight on an open line, to where it would be like a guy was here and a guy could be there, but they would fight like in a two-line kind of column. But they could still function to where they would fight and hold the ground as a line and move, but yet it wouldn't be impeded by this terrain, which was how European or Civil War style combat wouldn't work through here, because it's not conducive to that. Wayne knew that. That's how the Indians didn't want, the Native Americans didn't want you to fight that way, because they knew it wasn't conducive to them. They wanted to fight to their advantage and use the terrain to their advantage. Wayne wanted to use that advantage against them, or fight to where he could at least succeed in that manner. So Wayne also had set up to where he would have his own gun. He had, instead of using the traditional musket, and Wayne had to fight both Knox and Washington to get this approved. He had a musket design so his men could fight, could reload and shoot while they kept moving, which with a Civil War style musket or a Revolutionary style musket, that wasn't possible. You had to have your dry powder and everything else, load up dry powder your shot, prime it, and go. And if you were lucky, you could get 4 shots off in a minute. But that wasn't conducive to this style of fighting either. You couldn't really keep going. And so he had it set up so that was the case. Because the Native Americans also used bow and arrows beyond just muskets. And so they could fire off a lot faster than somebody trying to load a traditional musket could, giving them more firepower. Now, when Wayne had set his other forces that were with him, the Kentucky Volunteers, on ahead to scout, and they had discovered that the Native Americans were here, ready to fight. And they were like, well, it's perfect for an ambush. So Wayne had his forces set up to where they had a small force of the Kentucky Volunteers, then they had a larger force of the Kentucky Volunteers, and then he had his first line of regulars, then he had like a larger force of the regulars set up. So the Kentucky Volunteers get surprised that they're going back to that bigger line, and they get surprised and overwhelmed, and they fall back onto his volunteers, or onto his regulars. And just whenever they seem to be getting overwhelmed, Matt Anthony's getting a little upset, and it looks like, according to Harrison, looks like he's getting ramped up, ready to go, and just charge into the guys. And this is without giving everybody standing orders. And so Harrison kind of insinuates as much to Wayne, and Wayne's like, well, let's just go ahead and charge into it. Like, that's my orders, so let's charge. Like, so what if I do go ahead straight on in? Now before this battle, Wayne actually had to be helped up onto his horse before the battle, like for a couple days. Gout had gotten to him and a couple other things, and he almost had a tree fall down on him. And it came very close to ending his life. Got very lucky. But on top of all of that, the Native Americans, how they got ready for a battle is they would eat one meal before the day before a battle. Well, they had done this for 3 or 4 days straight because they were expecting Wayne to attack. Well, at some point, after getting only eating one meal, you might have a calorie deficit. So you may not have the exact same energy you normally would before a battle. And so that might have helped impact the battle here. But what happened after Wayne's forces were starting to come through, or the Native Americans were pushing into Wayne's forces, they would always try to surround the try to surround their enemies. Good tactic to use. They were also outnumbered here. From everything I can tell, there might have been 1,500 to 2,000 or so here, and Anthony Wayne's force was around 3,000 or so. It extended for like 2 miles. Native Americans tried to hit Wayne with a right hook. It didn't quite work because Mad Anthony expected that, and so right when they were getting ready to swing, Wayne said, "No, no, no," like Mutombo, and he had a force waiting on them in the rear. But I think it was like about 500 men of his Kentucky volunteers ready to hit that same force. And they were surprised, and they started to retreat. The rest of the Native Americans started to retreat as well. And they kept falling back. Now, when that was the case, Wayne's men just kept marching and marching, and it just kept putting more and more pressure on them. Eventually, they hightailed it to Fort Miami, which is where we'll pick up the rest of the story.